My mother used my diploma as a mousepad and called my degree worthless, so I made sure she'd never forget its value. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. Neither of my parents finished high school. My older siblings dropped out or never pursued education beyond the minimum required. I was different. I worked full-time while attending classes. I took out loans and applied for every scholarship available. I spent 6 years completing a degree that should have taken 4 because I couldn't afford to go full-time. When I finally walked across that stage and received my diploma, I cried because I had accomplished something nobody in my family thought possible. My mother, Constance, never supported my education. She thought college was a waste of time and money. She said I was getting above myself by thinking I needed a fancy degree. She said plenty of successful people never went to university, and I was just trying to act better than everyone else. She resented every class I took and every dollar I spent on tuition. She made comments about how I thought I was too good for the family now. She predicted I would fail and come crawling back with nothing to show for my efforts except debt. I proved her wrong. I graduated with honors and got a job in my field within 3 months. I started paying off my loans and building a career that would have been impossible without my degree. I was proud of what I accomplished despite zero support from the people who should have encouraged me most. My diploma represented years of sacrifice and determination. It was physical proof that I could set a goal and achieve it no matter how many obstacles stood in my way. When I received the official document, I had it professionally framed with archival materials to protect it from damage. I hung it in my apartment where I could see it every day. It reminded me of what I was capable of when I believed in myself. I moved to a new apartment 2 years ago and temporarily stored some belongings at my mother's house during the transition. The boxes contained things I didn't need immediately but wanted to keep safe. Books and winter clothes and some framed items, including my diploma. I asked my mother to keep the boxes in her spare room until I could pick them up. She said fine and seemed annoyed by the minor inconvenience. The transition took longer than expected because of issues with my new lease. 3 months passed before I finally had space to retrieve my belongings. When I went to my mother's house to collect everything, she was using her computer in the living room. I glanced at her desk and felt my stomach drop. My diploma was lying flat under her mouse. The glass from the frame was gone. The document itself was covered in scratches and coffee stains. The corner was torn where it had been roughly handled. She had removed my diploma from its protective frame and was using it as a surface to slide her computer mouse across. 6 years of work, countless sacrifices, the first college degree in our entire family history, and my mother was using it to move her mouse around while she browsed the internet. I asked her what she was doing. She looked up casually and said her old mouse pad wore out and she needed something flat. She said the diploma was just sitting in a box doing nothing, and this way it was at least useful. She said I shouldn't be so precious about a piece of paper. I picked up the diploma and examined the damage. The raised seal was scratched beyond recognition. The signatures were smeared from liquid spills. The paper itself was warped and stained in multiple places. It was ruined beyond any possibility of repair. I asked why she would destroy something so important to me. She said it wasn't destroyed, just used. She said I could wipe it off and it would be fine. She said I was overreacting like I always did about my precious education. She said the diploma didn't mean anything anyway because plenty of college graduates were unemployed and struggling. She said at least this way the paper served a purpose. I stood in her living room holding the destroyed evidence of my greatest achievement and realized something clearly for the first time. My mother didn't just fail to support my education. She actively resented it. She resented that I accomplished something she told me I couldn't do. She resented that I proved her predictions wrong. She resented that I built a life she said was impossible. Using my diploma as a mousepad wasn't careless. It was deliberate. She found the most symbolic way possible to diminish what I achieved. She took the physical representation of my success and turned it into a disposable office supply. She wanted me to see it being used as garbage because that's how she viewed my accomplishments. I didn't yell or argue. I just took the ruined diploma and left. I requested a replacement from my university, which cost money and required paperwork but was possible. I had it framed again with even better protection and hung it in my home where no one could touch it. The original was gone forever, but the achievement remained mine regardless of what happened to the paper. Then I started pulling back. Hashtag I stopped answering her calls right away. The first time my phone buzzed with Constance's name, I watched it vibrate across my coffee table and did nothing. By the end of that first week, I had 17 missed calls and didn't feel guilty about a single one. 3 weeks went by before I noticed I hadn't actually spoken to my mother at all. My apartment felt different, quieter somehow, but in a good way. I could look at my replacement diploma without feeling that tight knot of resentment. I took a photo of the diploma in its new frame and posted it on social media with a caption about hard work paying off, making sure not to tag any family members. That evening, Constance called 6 times. Her voicemails got sharper with each message. The first asked why I was posting dramatic things. The second said I was being ridiculous about a piece of paper. The rest demanded I call her back and stop acting like a child. She told my sister Megan I was holding a grudge over nothing, that she accidentally used my diploma as a mousepad. Megan texted asking what was going on. I found the photo I'd taken of the destroyed diploma, the scratched seal, the coffee stains, the torn corner. I sent it without explanation at first, then typed out exactly what happened, how I'd stored my belongings in Mom's spare room, how I came back to find my diploma being used under her computer mouse, how she said it was just sitting in a box doing nothing and might as well be useful. 4 weeks after I stopped answering calls, my manager told me I was promoted to senior analyst with a significant raise and my own office. Everything I'd studied for was finally paying off in exactly the way Constance said it never would. I hung my diploma on the wall behind my desk where I could see it every day. The document represented 6 years of sacrifice that no one could take away from me. Megan showed up at my apartment one Saturday holding 2 coffees. She admitted the destroyed diploma had shocked her. She'd never realized how unsupportive Constance had been throughout throughout my entire college experience. I found myself talking about things I'd buried for years. How mom made comments about me thinking I was too good for the family every time I studied. How she predicted I would fail. How she resented every scholarship I won. Megan's face changed as I listed incident after incident. Hearing my own words made me realize how bad it actually was. Thanksgiving approached, and Constance sent a group text announcing dinner at her house like always. She assigned me the green bean casserole, written like nothing had changed. I said I had other plans this year. The family group chat exploded. My aunt called privately, using words like forgiveness and family bonds. She said Constance was my mother, and family was forever. I felt the familiar guilt rising up, the lifetime of conditioning that told me keeping the peace mattered more than protecting myself. I interrupted her and said I needed space right now. Constance started calling relatives within days. My cousin forwarded me a text my mother had sent to multiple family members. The message painted Constance as a confused and hurt mother who didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She left out the diploma incident completely. She framed everything as me suddenly deciding to stop talking to her for no reason. I made an appointment with my therapist, Siobhan Rollins. I sat in her office and unpacked everything. She asked me to think about other times Constance had undermined my achievements. The examples came flooding out. How mom said I was getting above myself when I got accepted to college. How she predicted I would fail. How she resented every scholarship and every good grade. Siobhan helped me identify dozens of moments creating what she called a constant background radiation of not being good enough. The grief hit me hard. I'd spent years seeking approval from someone who was never going to give it because my success threatened her entire narrative about education being worthless. Christmas arrived and I agreed to attend a small gathering at Megan's house. Constance made pointed comments about how busy I must be since I never called anymore. She said successful people sometimes forgot where they came from. Every comment was aimed at me even when she was talking to someone else. I maintained polite distance and didn't take the bait. I stayed for exactly 2 hours before leaving. Driving home, I felt relieved rather than guilty. 4 months later, the HR director told me I'd been selected to lead a major project presented directly to executive leadership. That evening, I celebrated with friends who toasted my success without any qualifications. Nobody told me I was getting above myself. Constance heard about my project through Megan within a week. She called and launched into unsolicited advice about not getting too confident. She reminded me that the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Every sentence was designed to undermine my achievement. I said I needed to go and hung up. I texted Megan asking her not to share information about my career with our mother anymore. I needed to protect my accomplishments from her negativity. 2 months later, a birthday card arrived with a check for $50. She'd written a note saying she hoped I was doing well, and that family was always here for me when I was ready to stop being angry. No acknowledgement of what she'd done, no apology. Just the assumption that time would make me forget without her having to change anything. 3 weeks later, I called Constance and explained I was willing to have a limited relationship, but it required boundaries. She needed to stop making dismissive comments about my education and career. There was silence. Then Constance said I was too sensitive and she was entitled to her opinions. She said she was my mother and shouldn't have to walk on eggshells around me. She couldn't promise to censor herself just because I couldn't handle honest feedback. I hung up feeling like I'd tried to set a reasonable boundary and been told my feelings didn't matter. The anger shifted to something calmer and sadder. The acceptance that my mother would never be who I needed her to be. She would always see my success as a threat. I couldn't change her, and I needed to stop hoping she would suddenly develop the capacity to support me. 6 months later, my partner proposed. When I told my family about the engagement, I made it clear that wedding planning would be handled without input from relatives who hadn't been supportive. Constance wasn't involved in any traditional mother-daughter activities. The wedding day arrived under clear blue skies. Constance attended as a regular guest rather than an honored participant. During the reception, she made one comment about the expense of the venue. Megan quietly told her to stop. I realized I'd built a life full of people who celebrated my successes rather than diminished them. My mother's presence felt less important than it would have years ago. She was just another guest, not the central figure I'd once imagined. A year after my wedding, I settled into a relationship with Constance that consisted of occasional family gatherings and brief phone calls. She still made subtle digs, but they landed differently now. I'd stopped expecting her to change and started protecting myself from her negativity. I'd accepted that my mother would never celebrate my achievements or acknowledge the harm she caused. That acceptance brought a kind of peace, even though it wasn't the resolution I'd wanted. 2 years after finding my diploma under Constance's mouse, I stood in my home office looking at the replacement on the wall. The bitterness had faded into something calmer. My career kept advancing. My marriage was strong and supportive. The diploma represented more than 6 years of sacrifice now. It proved I could accomplish something meaningful despite zero support from the people who should have encouraged me most. I looked at it and felt grateful for what I'd become in spite of her rather than because of her. That felt like the most important achievement of all.